this is of interest to me because I want to know how these characters are interacting with each other. I don't want to just know what they're saying, the content of what the words are that they're saying, but I want to know how they're talking to each other. And I find it remarkable that he's now confused. Okay. I think people should take note of that. Okay. So he says here, I have no way of telling you what I have in mind. He's only on definition 3 out of 5. For whatever proposals we put forward keep somehow moving around and they won't stay put. Remember, Euthyphro was very confident, bordering on arrogance at the beginning of this dialogue because he was putting his father on trial for murder. And he was putting his trial for murder for the charge of impiety. So when Socrates asks him what piety is, well, what is it, the thing that you're charging your father for not having? You're charging for murder. That's a pretty big charge. Tell me, you must know then, what is piety? He was so sure that he knew what piety was. Turns out he didn't know. A little bit of a foreshadowing here. We all knew that he didn't know, but it's kind of funny to see now he's in confusion. So aporia is the word here. See that second bullet point, aporia, and of course the heading, befuddlement, confusion, something like that. So it's translated with as without passage or without a way. So in the prefix a, prefix a in the Greek language means the negation of something, like atheist, or agnostic, or whatever it may be, right? So apathy, for example. So aporia means without a something, and the something is a passage. And so this would often be used in nautical contexts, like in seafaring voyages and so on. Like if your passage was blocked or something, you couldn't find a way forward, maybe there was a reef or something, you would be said to be in aporia. So, but you can use this in sort of figurative terms as he does here. Aporia just means I don't have a way forward. Aporia then is, and I wrote a whole paper about this, and now I'm going to sort of break this down by points that I've found, not only in the Euthyphro, but in other dialogues as well, because we see that this happens. If you want to, let me pull this up. If you want to find, let me find my publications here. There it is. Let me just pull this up. Here we go. So this is what this looks like. So this was published by AAPT Studies in Pedagogy, the American Association for Philosophy Teachers, back in, 2019, it says. So I wrote a whole paper on this. You can see, if you want to look this up and read it on your own. I know some people will be interested. That's why I'm taking the time to show it. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the uses of Plato's, of aporia and Plato's Socratic dialogues. And there's some other elements in here in the paper itself that we're just not going to get to. So I'll put that aside. Put this back on stage here. Oh, actually, let's move that. We're going to do this. Right there. It's bigger. Okay. Sorry. Back to your schedule programming. All right. So that's if you wanted to go chase that down. Like I say here, and like I argue in that paper, aporia, last bullet point, is the start of true philosophical exploration, according to Socrates, since you won't look for that which you think you already know, right? So if I get to a point where I'm confused, right? If we just think about Euthyphro, he was confused. Sorry, he was not confused at first. He was very sure. He was very confident, falsely confident, that he had the answer. Now, if you think you know the answer, why would you keep looking for the answer? You won't. And so this confusion, this befuddlement, this sort of being stumped, this puzzlement, this is a very critical step. It's almost like a 12-step program, like for addiction recoverers. Like it's step 1, like noticing that you have a problem. At the beginning, Euthyphro didn't think he had any problem. He think he had all the answers. And so this is like, okay, there's a problem here. And so notice here, take a lesson here from Socrates' playbook. Don't do this in your online interactions with people. Don't go to them and say, you are confused, you're an idiot. That's not what Socrates did. Like, Socrates obviously knew that Euthyphro was full of crap, that he did not know what he was talking about. He knew that from the very first part. Like, oh, I'm an expert, I know what piety is. Socrates is look, this is at the end of Socrates' death. He's already an old wise man, and all of his fame all the way down through the ages for 2,500 years to where we get him now. Like, this is prime peak Socrates that we're getting. So Socrates is very wise at this point in his life. He's not just going to be listening, and that's why it's ironic, the Socratic irony, being a little bit sarcastic by saying, look, hey, you be my teacher, Euthyphro. He didn't really mean that, right? So, but notice what Socrates did. He did not just go head to head, toe to toe with Euthyphro and say, he had every right to say this, but he did not say, Euthyphro, you're an idiot, you don't know what you're talking about. Instead, he circumnavigated his will, that hard-headedness. He circumnavigated that, got him to be a little bit confused by engaging with him, and now Euthyphro's past that first step in the 12-step program. I recognize there's a problem. I don't know what I'm talking about. So now Euthyphro's a little bit more open to discussion, okay? So, as Socrates says in the Theaetetus right here, philosophy begins in wonder. And so, like I say here, much like the first step in any 12-step substance abuse program, one must admit a problem exists. And there are 4 distinct ways, as I outlined in that paper I shared earlier. 4 distinct ways aporia appears in Plato's dialogues. Aporia appears in Socrates' interlocutors, his conversation partners. Obviously, as you see here, Euthyphro is very confused. It appears in Socrates himself. So I think that's very telling. We'll talk about each of these. It appears in Socrates' accusers, and it appears in the form of an invitation to the reader. Because again, Plato's writing all this, and he's, knowing where these things are going, he might just leave something open to us. So number 1, aporia in Socrates' interlocutors, obviously in our dialogue, but there are other dialogues as well. So in the Credo says, I cannot answer your question, Socrates, for I do not know. The second one, it turns out, Socrates in Symposium, I didn't know what I was talking about in that speech. This is a funny one, because this is a setting where they're going around and standing up and giving these, windy speeches and everything, being very eloquent. I know this symposium is about what is love, what is virtue, and so on. And they get out and they're each, these flowing speeches. And imagine somebody getting up and doing this big flowery speech and then sitting down, and then Socrates just says one thing and he says, oh, it turns out I didn't know what I was talking about in that big grand speech. Whoops. Number 3, in the Meno, he likens it to being stung by a torpedo fish, numbed in both soul and mouth, having nothing left to say. And then in the 4th one, Euthyphro, we'll see at the end of this dialogue, he says, some other time, Socrates, for I'm in a hurry now. It's time for me to go. That's just what we see later, but we also see it here. He's also very confused. What was right here? He says right here, I have no way of telling you what I have in mind. For whatever proposals we put forward, keep moving around. They won't stay put. So he's obviously confused. Okay, number 2, it also appears in Socrates himself. Socrates, I think this is very telling. Like I said, Socrates acknowledges when he himself is confused. I think this is a real, honest humility. And I think it's something we can learn. Right, so the Apology, when he's being put on trial, Socrates expresses confusion or aporia over the meaning of the oracle statement, and it lasts quite a long time. And Socrates, but here's the thing, Socrates doesn't get angry or frustrated over his confusion. We're not reading the Apology, but if you go and read it, if you've read it in Intro to Philosophy 101 or something, just read it on your own. It's very readable, very easy to read, very short. But Socrates doesn't show frustration. As I say here, he appears to show no discomfort with his ignorance as such. There's some discomfort only in the sense of, oh man, I don't know and I wish I did know. But he's not angry at himself. He doesn't appear ashamed of not knowing. It's a natural state for a human to be in. You just don't know sometimes. He does not appear ashamed or embarrassed by his own ignorance. 3, there's a discomfort only in the sense of unwillingness to settle comfortably and completely for not knowing. 4, so aporia is used constructively by the philosopher to help us get to the truth of important matters. The sophists, on the other hand, they don't do that. We talked about the sophists at the very beginning of this slideshow. The sophists are all about winning arguments. Socrates is all about getting to the truth. So the sophists, when they use confusion or aporia on their opponent, they're not doing it like Socrates is doing it to Euthyphro. It's like a teaching moment. It's like I've got to get this guy kind of unsettled and circumnavigate his will and his stubbornness to get into a conversation about, making some progress. That's not what the sophists do. They do it to humiliate their opponents. Tell me if you've heard this before. This is like what is wrong, I think, with the modern day debate sphere online, is people just want to one up one another. And also the sophists, not only did they confuse and make fools of their opponents, but they wanted to put them in confusion for the sake of being in confusion. Like, they wanted to put them in confusion and leave them there. That's not what Socrates does. He puts them in confusion and helps them out of the confusion. So for Socrates, aporia, confusion, is not an end point. It's only a means to an end. So he will confuse you, but he's not going to leave you there. And I think that's also a really beautiful lesson. Like, especially as a teacher, like, yeah, there are going to be a couple of times, and I'll talk about this in the article, where I need to confuse students, or I need to kind of cultivate this curiosity or this unsettledness, or like, what does he really mean by saying this really confusing thing here? But I'm not going to leave them there. I mean, and if I do, it may be like, well, think about it and we'll discuss it next time we meet or something like that. It's not a permanent state. Like, I think not all philosophy professors do this, unfortunately. I think many of them, they will confuse the heck out of their students and then see ya, and then that's it. Like that. And I think that's really dangerous. And I don't agree with that at all, because that's not what we see in Socrates here. Okay, so number 3, we see it in Socrates' accusers. This is kind of like the first one in his conversation partners. We'll skip it. But also 4, aporia or confusion could be as an invitation to the reader. So some of Plato's dialogues, including this one, end without any firm resolution to the question that enjoys central place in the dialogue. So these are so-called aporetic dialogues. So the Theaetetus is one of them. The central question is, what is knowledge? They really don't ever arrive at a definitive answer. And I think also in the Euthyphro, I say perhaps even here, but I think it's pretty evident. Like, there is no definitive answer to what piety is. It just kind of fizzles out, clearly so, because Euthyphro leaves. And I think this usage of, like I say here, aporia could perhaps be intentional on behalf of Plato, the author here, who again was a student of Socrates. He knew these methods, as it invites the reader to participate in the same learning process as his characters.